Now we have a special guest on set right now. It's been a really bad day. We were all very depressed because of the stock market, but we have one of America's great humorists and raconteurs, Orson Bean. Welcome. Orson, you know, for those of you who are slightly younger than I am, you may have missed all of his stuff on The Tonight Show, which kept us up to the crack of dawn, but he is also an author. He's an everything kind of regular guy, and he is here because he's written a new book, Mail for Mikey. You can find it at OrsonBeanBook.com.
Or the old-fashioned way at Barnes & Noble.
No, all right, yeah, the old-fashioned way. If you, right. The book is about your many transformations, specifically, into one of faith. How did you get there? How did a cynical humorist like Orson Bean become a man of faith?
My earliest memory, Roger, is wanting to be happy, and I said, I'm going to be happy. I grew up in a kind of an unpleasant house, as most people did, and I tried everything. I've been somewhat famous my whole adult life, not so famous that I had to put on dark glasses to walk on the sidewalk, but famous enough that a head waiter would recognize me and give me a good table. I've always had enough dough. I've had more good sex than anyone I know, and all of it. And I drank Canada dry, and it all worked for a while. And when it stopped working, I began sniffing around with God. I went to one religion and then another religion, and finally I took a shot at Christianity. I was interested but suspicious, terrified of becoming Ned Flanders. Anyway, little by little, I met a guy who said to me, it was in a period of my life when I was in a 12-step program, and he said, get down on your knees in the morning and thank God for the night's sleep. And I said, well, I don't think I believe in God. He said, it doesn't matter, just do it. I said, why do I have to get on my knees? He said, he likes it. I said, I tried it. And little by little, it stopped feeling weird, and it started feeling good, and I began to feel like my prayer was being heard. And then I began to feel like I was being taken care of and provided for by whatever it was that created me. And that's how it began.
And how did Mikey transpire? Who's Mikey and what's this Mikey stuff?
Mikey, the book Mail for Mikey is a series of emails that an older guy sends to a young 20-year-old drunk named Mikey. And he tells him about life. And in the book, I really tell about everything I've learned in all my years on this earth. And Mikey is not really a real character, but it was a conceit by which I was able to do a kind of a funny, raunchy take. It has the F word in it. It won't be carried in Christian bookstores, but it's about my love affair with God.
Who should play Orson Bean in the movie version?
Oh, what's his name on The Office, that guy?
Oh, not Orson himself. All right, then, how did your distinctive stage name come about? I know Orson Bean may not be the real name here.
I was born with the name Dallas Burroughs.
Nothing wrong with that.
Nothing wrong with it. It sounds like a name some fool named Orson Bean would change his name to. And I was doing a comedy magic act to no discernible response in a joint in Boston, and my opening line was, good evening, my name is Dallas Burroughs, Harvard 48. Pause, Yale nothing. You could hear crickets in the back, cries of, bring out the stripper. The piano player in the band said, your act is not going over because the opening joke doesn't play, and that's because you don't have a funny name. So every night, he made up a different name for me. One night he said, tell him your name is Roger Duck. I went out, my name is Roger Duck, Harvard 48, bring out the stripper. He made up the name Orson Bean. It got a laugh, and my career was made. I kept it.
If you've got a laugh, keep it. All right, now, Pajamas TV, we do a lot of political stuff.
Yeah.
And what do you have the interesting distinction of having been blacklisted from both sides.
That's right.
And it's something I share with you a little bit. But anyway, how did this begin? I mean, tell us about you during the blacklist of the 50s and then your Nixon affair and so forth.
I wasn't all that political, but I was horny for a communist girl. So I went to a number of meetings with her. Then I decided to run in AFTRA, the television unions, against the blacklist. So when we won, they dug up my meetings with the communist girl and blacklisted me. So it worked out. I got a show on Broadway the whole year I was blacklisted. Ed Sullivan himself called to say, I can't use you Sunday, because he'd heard about the Red Channels thing. He said, I'll help you when I can. And sure enough, almost a year to the day, Roger, he called himself and said, I think it's past enough, I can help you. So that was a side of Ed that nobody knew about. He really helped people.
That's interesting. So now, so then then you became, after being chasing communist women and being blacklisted on the left, you then supported Nixon that quickly thereafter?
It wasn't that quickly. It was a few years later, and I thought to myself, no liberal Democrat could end the war in Vietnam without being called soft on communism. So I thought maybe Nixon could. And I decided to support Nixon. And for my pains, I was pulled off of a commercial by a hotshot New York agency that said, "The son of a bitch is a fascist." And so I was blacklisted as a communist at one point and a fascist on the other hand. Some years ago, I received 2 Christmas cards, and they were both up on my refrigerator for quite a while. One was from the Republican National Committee, and the other one was from Gus Hall, the head of the American Communist Party. And I said, wow, I'm proud of those things.
Okay, now that makes you a guy who definitely goes both ways. How does this come up now with in present time? How do you feel about the current political
Well,
system?
I'm a Christian in what is conceived by and large as an atheist business, television. But I was guesting not long ago on a sitcom, 2.5 Men, and I was sitting there reading a book about Christianity, Mere Christianity by C.S. Lewis. And I can't tell you how many people, crew and cast alike, came over and asked me about it. There seems to be a hunger out there. So I'm a conservative and a Christian, but if they hate me, I refuse to be hated. See, I think it's like voodoo. If you have a Roger doll and stick pins in it and Roger doesn't believe it hurts him, it doesn't. So I simply refuse to be hated.
Not a bad idea, but one of the solutions to not being hated is probably being funny. Now, tell us a little bit about what you've been doing on YouTube. I think we have one of these queued up. You've been giving us neophytes lessons on what's a good joke.
The art of joke telling is gone. People do one-liners. Nobody tells jokes. And my son-in-law, Andrew Breitbart, said, you must preserve these jokes for posterity. So I just put a bunch of them out on the YouTube to see what would happen, and people are watching them.
Have we got one of these out there, one of these YouTube jokes?
Otherwise, I'll tell one.
The joke should be short and always told in the present tense. An example. An old guy is on his deathbed. His son sits next to him on a chair. The old guy says, is that your mother's brisket I smell cooking downstairs? He says, yes, Pa. He says, ask her, could I have a piece? He says, Ma says it's for after.
I think we got some laughs on that.
Shall I tell you my favorite of them?
Okay, go ahead.
Guy runs into the doctor's office. He says, doctor, doctor. The doctor says, control yourself, my good man. What seems to be the trouble? He says, my fell off. He says, where is it?
This is not on this network.
What? I can't tell it?
Yeah, okay.
I'll tell another one then.
Okay.
Guy goes for a checkup, an old guy. Doctor says, Mr. Mendelsohn, we'll need a sample of your urine, your feces, and your sperm. He says, take my shorts.
All right, now.
Why couldn't I tell the other one? Too
now,
dirty?
to clean this up, let's go over to. This is a family values network, and just to prove that.
I'm a Christian, you know.
He's a Christian, yes. Just to prove that, we have on the line with us now Orson Bean's son-in-law, one of the lords of the internet, Andrew Breitbart. Andrew, are you there?
I am. Hello, Orson. I can't believe that we have the internet all to ourselves without the FCC, and you can't tell that joke. Orson, will you tell it? I will not say another word unless they allow for you to tell you my favorite joke. Tell them my favorite joke.
An old guy picks up a hooker. He takes her up an alley. He drops his pants. The hooker says, I got to have the money first. He pays her. She runs away. He stands there. He says, well, it shouldn't be a total loss. I'll take a
All right. Moving right along here.
We're dead and in hell, Roger.
Yes, this is a Christian network, according to Orson Bean. But let's ask some more serious questions here about the Andrew, about what the family values of the Bean household are. How do you live in a household where everybody is politically hostile to the other person?
Well, you know, it's interesting. Orson and Allie, his wife, live in the Venice on the Venice canals, which by L.A. standards and by Hollywood standards, I call Dennis Kucinich bumper sticker country. I mean, the people there. He has some of the most wonderful neighbors in the world. George Carlin, who just passed, lived right across the way, hardcore lefty. The neighbors next to them, Connie, and what's the name of the professor?
Ray.
Orson?
Ray.
Right. They are the most wonderful, wonderful people you could possibly meet. They remind me of what the left used to be like. There's something kind of sweet down there about the lefties, and there are a lot of closet conservatives down there as well. But Orson and I are completely outnumbered. Our family members who consider themselves on the left far outnumber Orson and me. But Orson and I are the informed and funny ones, so we keep winning.
It's true.
You keep winning, but have you changed any minds?
No, I don't try to. I don't care. Attraction, not proselytizing. You know, little by little they say, how come he's that old and he's that happy? He's got a hot young wife that he chases around. What's going on? Maybe I should be like that.
Orson, you're redefining our image of a Christian here. I thought you just wrote this book, Mail for Mikey. What did you put in the mail to him?
God loves me and he lets me get away with murder.
I see that. Andrew, how did it happen that one day when you were romancing your now wife, you walked home and found that her father-in-law was Orson Bean? What happened?
Oh, you have no idea. I was waiting tables down in Venice on Abbot Kinney, which is sort of the hippy-dippy avant-garde area. And I remember seeing Orson Bean. He would sit there at this restaurant on Sundays doing the New York Times crossword puzzle, which is sort of a caricature of what you would think Orson Bean did with his weekends. And then I started dating his daughter. I went over to their house on the canals, and as you're nervous about to meet your father-in-law or the father of the person that you're dating, I started going through his library, and I saw that he wrote a book called Me and the Orgone. And so I start thumbing through this book, and it starts talking about basically the path towards enlightenment is having the most amount of sex that you possibly can. And I thought to myself, I think I've hit the jackpot here.
He also found a book by Rush Limbaugh next to it.
Rush Limbaugh.
You know what's interesting about that? At that time, I considered myself a bit of a liberal. This was 1991, and I remember not being angry at Orson at the time. I just couldn't understand how a guy who lived in Venice, who was a comedian, a guy who had been blacklisted, it made no sense to me how he could like Rush Limbaugh. And I had never listened to Rush Limbaugh, but I knew instinctively that he was an evil guy. And Orson said, "Are you sure that you've listened to him? Because he's not evil. He's actually a very lighthearted, funny, and informed guy." And I had never heard the guy, and I was absolutely convinced that Orson was wrong.
So you think, Andrew, that Orson is responsible for some of your political migration?
Well, you know what? Orson and I always try and find out where we differ on things, and we have fairly nuanced opinions on things, so it's not, and I still have yet to find where Orson and I disagreed. You know what? It's on God. That's the big thing, because I'm agnostic. I left the tribe. I'm not a practicing Jew. And he says, you'll eventually get there. So we agree on everything political. It's just on the religion thing. I think it's mail for Andrew, and you just won't admit it.
Well, Mikey is a fictional character, so it could well be.
I should have written mail for your name here.
Your name here. Well, all right. Thanks for joining us, Andrew. And
Thank you.
Thanks for making this a family affair.
I love you best, Andrew. Don't tell the others.
We hope to have you both back soon. Now let's go to Bill Whittle and Joe Hicks to find the connection between Sarah Palin and red state feminists.